Are you sure you want to do this?
Hello everyone, welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today, I'm joined by my co-host who loves to hug my face, Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about Alien Romulus. We've been really waiting for this one. Great trailers on this movie, and now we've gone to the theater and we have seen it. But of course, if you have seen Alien Romulus as well, or other entries in the Alien franchise, as we have,
yes,
we actually prepared for... We watch all the Alien movies in preparation for Prey, because we
exactly.
want to watch all the AVP
well,
movies.
yeah, you got it.
But if you've seen all those movies, you want to talk to us about it, we have a Discord you can join to talk to us about movies and talk to other people about movies. We're not the only ones in there. You can leave a comment on this, leaving your thoughts about Alien Romulus, and of course, subscribe to the channel for more like this.
Of course.
Not more Alien Romulus reviews. Unlikely we ever review this movie again.
Yeah, probably not. What if it gets a Best Picture nomination?
That's a great point. We'll review it on Quest.
Yeah.
But Tanner,
Yes.
we saw the movie.
Yes.
We've been waiting for it.
Yes.
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 What do you think?
So Tucker, let's rewind a little bit to the social media reactions for this film that were less than glowing, I would say. Had me a little bit worried because I was very excited for this film through its marketing cycle. And so even through those, and even through, I'd say, like the first 20, 30 minutes of this movie, I was a little worried. I was not quite clicking with it a whole lot. I was doing some things that I didn't quite like. And I was like, oh no, is this going to be a letdown for me? Then, Tucker, Fede Alvarez turns it around.
Yeah.
Alien Romulus has some incredible set pieces in it. I think the performances are good after we get out of this like initial characterization stage and we just have them running around from set piece to set piece. I think they're good. The production design is phenomenal. The cinematography is very good. And it just turns into like a great sci-fi action horror romp by the time it all comes together. I have my reservations with it, but by and large, quite positive thoughts on Alien Romulus.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to break down this film sort of chunk by chunk as we talk about how especially your thoughts evolved over the course of the film, because I started in the opposite place. I was locked in from the opening moments just by how beautiful things are framed. How I think this movie has an amazing score that I think really sets the tone.
Really does.
And we're like, this throws me back to movies that I enjoy, that I have a particularly large amount of nostalgia for. Old Star Trek movies. Obviously, I love the older Star Wars movies. I love Alien. But there's just these shots like floating through space, like the sun peeking over a spaceship or a planet, and like a little bit of like flute playing and like little dark like space sounds underneath it. And I was getting goosebumps. I'm like, this is sci-fi imagery.
Yeah.
And so I was locked in from the very beginning. And I also thought that the characterization stage was really good. To give a little context, a little bit of what sets this film apart character-wise is that we see characters on a actual planet. We learn a little about their lives outside of the context of being on a space station or whatever. That I actually think adds quite a bit to this film, even though it is a relatively small chunk of it. But then it only continues to build from there. You mentioned almost every element of the production, and I will echo all of those, and we'll get deeper into them as we discuss. But I think a couple other things that I was really blown away by: the lighting, the use of different sources of light, different colors of light. The color design in this film is fantastic. Lots of practical effects,
of course. Lots
of really good CGI. A couple moments of not so good CGI, but
we'll talk about it.
But the dominant feeling that I had while I was watching this was like, this is one of the best produced sci-fi films I've ever seen. Just like from the way how crisp everything looks, how the sound design is matching the visual design. I'm like, oh my god.
Well, from that standpoint, I want to compliment Fede Alvarez, who I said up the top of my opening thoughts there. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is that he is a good director on whole.
Yeah. The only other films that we've seen from him are Don't Breathe and Evil Dead,
which are his two other feature studio films.
And The Girl in the Spider's Web.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one again.
Yeah. But I think those movies are okay. Yeah. I actually don't particularly like either of those movies. I think this is a massive step up for him.
But what I will say about those is that those are very well directed films. Right. I think you can see the building blocks for something like this given to us in Evil Dead and Don't Breathe, where he can craft a set piece very well.
Yeah.
He pays a lot of attention to practical effects as they echo perhaps his inspirations or direct series inspirations, like in Evil Dead, for example,
or like an Alien, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, But then I think we see those balloon ballooned out and taken to a budgetary end here in Alien Romulus.
This movie does look expensive.
It looks expensive. It's probably multiple magnitudes more expensive than both of those movies combined.
Of course.
So I think it shows that Fede Alvarez is a very good, especially visualist director, and that's something that I enjoyed both about Don't Breathe and especially Evil Dead.
Yeah, and I think what makes this Alien movie special is that it carries forth the legacy of the first film in being a smaller, more slasher-esque, tight, small cast, small location.
It's different than like James Cameron's Aliens,
or the recent Alien movies in Covenant and Prometheus that are much more about Ridley Scott's obsession with scope and scale.
They're much more grandiose.
Exactly. But it retains what I think I loved about Covenant and Prometheus is the studio backing, really high quality CGI and like just everything is so crisp and it feels produced. But I think even though that juxtaposition of the original Alien having the lower budget, I think that this film is able to set itself apart just by merit of the context in which it was produced in, because it does it toes the line, I think, really well between lots of small scale set pieces where we're in a very tight area, and that creates a lot of tension, and some, especially near the end, just massive blockbusters, CGI set pieces, and I'm like, well, all of these are good, and it means this movie has a lot of variety.
It's good in both directions, is really the point here. You mentioned towing the line, and that's a phrase that I really brought to mind in terms of how this film sets itself in the Alien series. So this film is set between the films Alien and Aliens. At the very beginning of this isn't necessarily a spoiler because it really has no impact on the story of the film. There is a sort of cold open where we see the wreckage of the Nostromo being like salvaged, essentially, and some mysterious masked figures, presumably the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, bringing on board.
And some really cool costumes. Those are great sci-fi costumes.
They bring on board this rock that has like an indent of a xenomorph in it, effectively, and so it is very much concerned with like making sure the timeline of the series is maintained and effectively fills in this gap between those two films of like how did the xenomorphs get from A to B, and this is kind of the story of that film.
ALEINES.
That's right, exactly. But Taco, we should talk about the cast and characters of this film as well.
Yeah, because this film, similar to Alien, and actually similar to Alien Covenant as well, does take, as we said, the more slasher approach in that we have a cast of characters who largely filled the space to be picked off one by one.
Of course.
This is, and especially with this being a younger cast than has ever been in an Alien movie before, this film, I think, does take more inspiration from 80s slasher movies in terms of the characters and the characterization of the cast. And I really like the cast. I think that we have two lead characters who I really want to get into and I think are really, really good. Everyone else around them I think they fill their role just fine. I think the performances are solid. I think that the way their different personalities lead to different sets of tension in different sequences depending who is present and what their mood is at the time. I think that the screenplay from that regard feels very tight and focused on where really these characters exist to fill roles to create different levels of tension in any given sequence where they are alive or not. Spoilers, most of them die.
In an Alien movie?
But I thought the cast was good to great from the angle of this being a slasher with people that are there that meant to be killed.
No, yeah, I mean, from the standpoint of a slasher, maybe I just need to like reframe my mindset to be a bit more in that area. But I don't know, just from like me recollecting my thoughts on the cast of other Alien films, and even more recent ones like Prometheus and Covenant. These supporting characters here, not speaking of our two leads, effectively, these supporting characters just stuck out to me as like super expendable. I don't care about them. I think that the actors are a little green behind the ears. They don't necessarily convince me or move me in any particular direction. Like obviously the guy who plays Bjorn, whose name we just learned moments ago, like he's supposed to be like the annoying one. But instead of feeling like that, I felt like it was annoying how he was trying to convince me that he was annoying. The performance was sort of doubling back on itself. I was like, it's just so transparent to me, the archetypes that we're trying to play into here, and
Yeah.
maybe I do need to reframe it to be more of a slasher thing. But for whatever reason, I think it's just a factor of the performances, if they feel natural or realistic to you, and frankly, they just didn't for our four supporting players here.
That's fair. I mean, I actually don't think I would necessarily. I think I would apply it to Bjorn, certainly.
Yeah.
But I think that the other characters is Isabella Merced as
Okay.
the Spike Fern as
Navarro.
no, that's a different person. That's Eileen Wu as Navarro.
Oh, I see.
Spike Fern as Bjorn, and
yeah.
Archie Renault as Tyler.
Right.
I think everyone outside of Bjorn, I thought was a lot better characterized than him.
That's fair.
In what their role is within this group. I think what's interesting is this film presents a group of characters that actually have known each other for a long time, which in many Alien movies, usually these people are just there for a job together, and then they through the course of the movie, we have to learn about who they are and what their relationships are because they don't know each other very much yet. But this film presents, this is basically like a group of childhood friends that they all come from this one planet and they're all trying to escape together. And so the film largely avoids giving us too much like interpersonal context outside of when it's their moments of what their goals are clashing, which I think is where the characterization actually does work. Again, fueling back into creating moments of tension in different sequences. Tyler, Bjorn is his cousin, and Isabella Merced is his sister, and so then when they're in danger, it causes him greater tension within given sequences. Our main characters in Andy and Rain, they have a tighter bond, and so then they care more about each other. But Cailee Spaeny and Isabella Merced are like best friends, and so I think there is a solid web of how different people feel about each other to where I think writing wise makes a lot of sense when they're more worried or less worried about people they like or don't like in sequences of like heightened tension.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I just didn't feel that at all. Like I just felt it was all operating at kind of the same hum. And we should talk about Cailee Spaeny and Dave Johnson.
Yeah.
So let's do that now.
Yes.
So again, this gets back to a bit of a screenplay issue, but like I said, in the first 20 minutes of this, it was a lot of like sort of ham-fisted getting to know people writing for me. It was like, well, I'm the nice one, I'm the virtuous one, and I'm the mean one, and I'm going to be mean to the android the whole time. Like there was just not a lot of dimension there for me.
Sure.
And for Cailee Spaeny in particular, they sort of lay out that initial internal conflict with her from the very beginning. She wants to get off the planet, and she can't take Andy with her, but she's for some reason like towing him along in hopes that she can somehow find a way to bring him along.
Yeah.
And
I think it makes sense in the situation that she's presented. Like, I don't think that is a failure of, like, choosing a side, necessarily.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Sorry, I just needed to finish my thought there. And so she was, so she has that sort of internal conflict, and then as the events of the film progress, Andy, I'll say it, rapidly changes personality due to a different chip that's put in him. He's the android after all. And I don't know, I felt like that character flip or that difference didn't really translate for me in Cailee Spaeny's character. Because like there's literally a moment like well after this has happened where she's like, why are you acting like this? What's going on, Andy? And
I mean, so let's just say from here on out, spoilers.
Sure, absolutely.
Because if we want to get into characterization and then some of the more ridiculous set pieces that require a little bit of spoilers to go into,
let's do it.
We want to make sure that you go see the movie, basically.
Absolutely.
This is a very good movie.
Yes.
I mean, it's a really good movie. I was incredibly surprised with how quality I thought basically every aspect of it was. And what is interesting about it is I do think there are these things to talk about with spoilers. So, Rain and Andy. I've seen all the other Alien movies.
Right.
Frankly, the only character I particularly remember is Ellen Ripley.
That's fair.
And also Bishop.
Right.
And because those are like the two iconic characters, they're the ones that show up the most amount of times. But other than Ellen Ripley has a cat, I don't remember almost anything about her personality or backstory or anything. I remember her like saving Newton aliens and like I remember a couple of things. I remember her dunking that basket in 3 or Resurrections 1 or 2. But and I've always thought that Sigourney Weaver does a good job as an action presence. But I think what made me, I'll have to think on this as I maybe revisit this movie and over the course of time, but I think, like Romulus more than any other films, is I do think that our characters are more human in this movie.
Okay.
They are younger. They are not professionals. They are in this situation for a personal gain rather than for like being there for a job. And I think that the way in which Rain's situation of being sort of trapped on this mining planet and the rules of the corporation kind of screwing her over, I think that, and her history of the fact that her parents have died and that she wants to get off this planet and like have a better future for herself, as they all do, I think that is a much stronger personal motivating factor as like a baseline than what I remember from other alien protagonists.
It's certainly these characters, for better or worse, depending on your dissuasion, I guess, are like capital W written characters. Whereas I would contend that Ellen Ripley, especially in Alien or Aliens, feels a bit more naturalistic in the fact that like she doesn't have these like screenwriter, this is what the character wants, this is what these are her characteristics. Sigourney Weaver, I think, allows you to breathe, or allows her performance to breathe a little bit more and flesh itself out to the point where she feels like a real person rather than being written like a real person. But I digress. Sorry, continue.
I mean, I guess I understand. I think it's just a different perspective on what feels realistic or relatable. I think is maybe the more correct term for what I'm feeling, because I do think that Rain, in having never shot a gun before and having never been to space before, and these sort of elements of her character, that she is kind of just a normal person put into this shitty place, as are all her friends around her who have different levels of experience with with Tyler, I think, was in the military or something, and
well, he read magazines about the military.
Well, I don't know. I feel like that maybe was like him like hiding something.
Yeah, maybe
because that doesn't make any goddamn sense. But I think that Rain and Andy and their relationship specifically is one of the best emotional connections between characters that I've seen. Maybe you could say Ripley and Newt in Aliens, but just the fact that they have this history, they have a very unique dynamic in that Andy is a synthetic who was saved from a dump by her father and then programmed to be a caretaker and also be her ostensibly her brother, as she refers to him throughout the film.
He's not your brother.
Yes. And then also he presumably through being discarded as a synthetic, he has damage, and so he kind of acts in a way that is like he has like Parkinson's or something. Yeah, he's kind of shaky.
He's got a stutter, and
mumbly.
Especially when he's oftentimes attacked by people who don't like androids in this movie. Yeah. He's sort of like down for the count anytime that he has any sort of damage to him.
And that, I think, is the key of this movie, and really me connecting to the characters is Andy as a synthetic is a totally new look into what a synthetic character can be in these movies. We've seen multiple evil synthetics over the course of this.
That is typically the role that they fill in the Alien franchise.
Andy is the nicest, most caring character in this film. Of course, there is the element of him having a directive to take care of Rain, and the directive element, I think, is a very interesting part of playing into what a synthetic feels and what their goals are across the course of the film. It does change. And then the way that growing up with Andy and caring about him, Rain has a much stronger connection to him as a synthetic and is defensive of him. And even though he is the physically stronger one because he isn't bound by his immortal coil, she's the one that ends up defending him. And so that dynamic and the fact that he is kind of like, he's like shy a little bit, but he's the one that actually has the power to like get them through the spaceship. Like, I just kept being consistently wowed and really drawn in by the fact that this is a really unique character dynamic, and this is a really unique situation, and the way that the other characters do or don't feel like prejudice towards him, and then he's able to sort of come into his own and take command in certain sequences. I thought this was all really well done, and watching Rain react to these things and be put through these scenarios, Cailee Spaeny just has such a understandable presence. Like she's there, like the reactions on her face, like feels so genuine. And she's been put in these crazy scenarios, and she's got this relationship with a synthetic character that's her brother and all this. I'm like, I believe in this dynamic, and I care about the way that they care about each other. Sure. And I found that really, really personally investing in the way that I've always liked the Alien series because the characters feel kind of distanced and they're there for a job and they're a little bit more cold or more militaristic. But this is the opposite of that. And I think both work really well, especially for a slasher. I think being personally invested in the protagonist and a core set of characters with her and Andy, I think that really helped draw me into the world of this film.
Yeah, I mean, we should move on because we're 20 plus minutes into this Alien review and we haven't talked about the Alien at all. But yeah, I mean, I guess for me,
It seems like a Quest review.
Yeah, exactly. The dynamics were just drew my attention more towards the screenplay, which I felt is a little bit weak, rather as opposed to the performances, which I think Fede Alvarez, for all the compliments I paid him at the top of the video, could maybe be a little bit better at giving his actors direction in that regard, from my opinion anyway.
I'm gonna quickly mention with screenplay, and you can get into like the sequences and the aliens and the horror and all that stuff.
Yeah. What people come to this review for, most likely.
I think that the screenplay on a large, I can agree with you, like some shaky like writing moments, dialogue moments, especially in the first like 20 minutes of the movie, the sound mixing is totally off.
Yeah,
it's not really easy to understand what people are saying. I actually thought the whole movie was gonna be like bad in that regard. It's really just a beginning issue. But the screenplay on the whole, I think, in terms of setting up stakes and setting up this is going to happen, and so we got to be quick about it, and especially within tension sequences, like, okay, why are they in this situation? Why do they have to be quiet or act filled with rage? Or whatever?
Yeah. When we're writing set pieces, then that's when we're good. But I mean, screenplay in the context of the characters that we were just talking about.
But I think it's very strong in terms of an overarching screenplay of like. Simple goal, simple stakes, understandable stakes,
and
like,
having
the gravity will come on in 2 minutes.
And yes, the countdowns are things. You know, we put a ticking clock on everything, which is also just a good screenwriting sort of play. So anyway, Tucker, set pieces, aliens, etc. Yeah. Quite surprised. Yada yada. First of all, we should talk about this before anything else. They do a CGI zombie Ian Holm in this. Yes, not a big fan. Very poorly implemented in the film. I think we both agree on that.
Easily the worst part of the film.
100%.
Because it feels at odds with the rest of the film tonally. And also CGI-wise, like by like 20 country miles worse CGI in the film.
You just can't do it convincingly. Hollywood needs to fucking learn this lesson. You shouldn't do it, and you can't do it convincingly. Yeah. So,
I mean, but I actually think it's some of the worst implementation I've seen. Yeah. Because they focus so much on his face, and like
it's really like
his lips and teeth aren't doing the right thing.
It's
sometimes.
Like Rogue One level. Like it's like we've regressed this technology back 10 years. Yeah. Anywho, so I was surprised. Speaking of the aliens and the xenomorphs, facehuggers, that how much of this film's horror is derived from the face huggers and not necessarily the aliens. The alien shows up when there's like an hour left in the film, maybe probably less than that. The xenomorph itself, and so I think the film really makes you wait and anticipate that. Yeah. But also it was interesting to see how much the face huggers sort of played a horror role in this. I mean, they are the key part of. What I would say, well, actually, no, not my favorite set piece in the film, but like the one that really jumped out to me from first, which is the slowly walking through the cargo hold or whatever, and they're all like perched on things when they're like spiders or like lizards of some kind. And also they're practical. I remember them talking about having built like the practical remote control face hugger robots or whatever, and you can feel that they feel much more tactile when they're like sort of skittering back and forth on something because they're practical effects. So. Yeah, it was just interesting to me that, because a lot of times when in an alien movie, especially more recent entries, are like sort of tripping over themselves. They're like, okay, the alien's back, and here he is.
I agree. I think it was a really smart choice to save the full-grown xenomorphs for the bigger, more bombastic set pieces near the end. I think they play really nicely with a variety of different kinds of, even mixtures of xenomorphs and facehuggers, which I think is kind of cool. It kind of ends up feeling like video gamey in a positive way. Exactly. Of like we've got the big enemies and the small enemies are a little more fodder. Yep. But those small enemies, the facehuggers, are terrifying. Yeah. They are faster. They jump at you. There's all this stuff. And you mentioned the hallway sequence where they got to be quiet. Amazing set piece.
Love it.
Really clever. Feels very, very different from the rest of the action set pieces and horror set pieces of this film. But even before that, the sequence I thought you were going to mention is when they're in the coolant room.
Oh, there's something in the water.
Something in the fucking water. Yeah, that sequence. But everything about that sequence I thought was so perfectly crafted.
Yeah,
it does one of the things that I love most about this movie is just like stark red light that really makes it stand out. The production design with these big tubes coming down from the ceiling, I thought was fantastic. The fact that because they removed the coolant, the room temperature is heating up, and the ship knows that this is the room where the alien eggs are being kept, so it locks down, and they got to figure out how to get the door open. And Andy is resetting because they just put a chip in him. Like it's just like all these different pieces put on this little chessboard, and everything's moving around so quickly. And the facehuggers are like swimming through the water, which is really cool. Like, and they're jumping out of the water, and no one knows what's happening at this point. I'm like, this is just an amazing horror set piece. Yeah. Like, I'm on the edge of my seat the entire time. Like, Andy needs to wake up. They need to get the door open. The things are in the water. Like, the facehugger's on one of them. Like, I just thought that was fantastic. And again, that is a very small scale, one room, tight, small set piece. Yeah. But then we amp things up, and then there's this amazing set piece in anti-gravity.
Yeah, that's the one where I'm like, especially because I forgot how long this movie was. Yeah. I thought it was an hour 40. It's actually a full 2 hours. So when we were doing the 0G alien acid blood floating in the so fucking good. It's like I was like, oh, this is a fucking great final set piece for this movie. But nay, dear viewer, it's not the final set piece. We get on the ship and everything. I was like, okay, we're winding down the movie. I had a surprise another third action sequence here.
Kind of like Furious 7. I remember us watching that movie and be like, this movie's got two great final sets. Oh no, Fast 5.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And then, so we set up this thing of Isabella Merced's character is pregnant in the film, and as soon as that gets introduced, I'm like, there's some fucked up shit gonna happen to that baby. Because I was like, oh yeah, it's never really happened. Because obviously the whole idea is that the alien forcibly impregnates you. I was like, well, how are they gonna mesh those two things with an actual human baby already in the womb? And we don't necessarily fight that with a facehugger. We instead infuse it with Prometheus engineered DNA,
or something,
which is an element of this film where it kind of tries to tie all the films together within itself,
which I think is nice.
Yeah, I can understand. I think sometimes it works better than others. Sure. Is my main takeaway there. And results in a super fucked up looking xenomorph engineer human hybrid thing,
which is crazy.
Which is a crazy design. It's fantastic. It's a total curveball in this movie that I really, really enjoyed throwing in there. And that is the final thing that Cailee Spaeny needs to defeat, and she does the classic blowing it out of the airlock. The visuals of this is really where the space stuff comes into play, because it's all backgrounded by the initial space station that they're on, the Romulus space station, slowly being shredded by an asteroid belt around the planet.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking that's such a great idea for a sci-fi spectacle, just nonsense.
And so she's fucking hanging out of the bottom of the escape pod that they're in, and this thing is crawling down trying to get her. There's sand creating this funnel around them as the sand in the bottom of the cargo hold. Yeah, as the sand in the bottom of the cargo hold gets sucked into the vacuum of space as well. It is really, really good stuff in the back third of this movie. It's really good.
And introducing this new element to the Alien series lore of that they are developing, the Weyland-Yutani is taking the xenomorphs and messing with their DNA to try to improve humanity because humanity is fragile. I think it's a great through line to introduce, kind of ties things together a little bit more.
We're jumping ahead from the goals of Prometheus and Alien Covenant in that regard, and then tying that in with the stuff that was always in there from the Alien franchise, which is Weyland-Yutani wants to capture and study the xenomorph.
Exactly. But the goal of it being to improve humanity, to make them stronger, more resilient to space travel, I think is really cool.
So they can be better workers at the end.
Of course. Yeah. But also the way that then allows us to get this new lore element of, if you do inject that while you're pregnant, you give birth to this fucking thing that then has its own egg and that has acid in it, but then it comes out, it's like a baby, and then it grows fast because it's part xenomorph, and then it just creates a different tone for the last actual set piece of this film, because we've never seen this thing before. Almost every Alien movie ends with a xenomorph that looks the same and usually acts the same.
You think you get away, you get on the spaceship, phew, we're out of here. Nope, final xenomorph on the spaceship.
And it's exactly that is the traditional thing, and this is that. But it's just different enough to where it feels like a very unique way to end the film.
It's a curveball. It sort of mirrors or goes back to Alien Resurrection, where we also had a xenomorph alien hybrid, being a clone of Ellen Ripley infused with the xenomorph DNA. And like that, like I said, that's one of the sort of homages that I think homages in this film to the rest of the series that I think works. I think there are some others that don't. I think it sort of undeftly at times can toe the line between homage and just blatantly like a remember this kind of thing. And those just those just happen to pull me out of the movie a little bit more than instead of like the human xenomorph thing, which I thought was like, this is fucking cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to note, just again, we mentioned the stakes of this movie and how there are multiple things of like, okay, the spaceship is going to crash in 36 hours, and then that gets sped up, and then there's this gravity element and everything. The last 20 minutes before the ship or the space station crashes into the asteroid belt, they say 20 minutes to impact. I was like,
20 minutes left in the movie.
I'm like,
I love when
8:45, and then they crash like 9:05.
I love when movies do that. I love that.
And it especially because that last sequence, I mean, that's a long sequence, a 20-minute plus sequence, but it's always keeping you on your toes. Okay, then we gotta save Isabella Merced, and then we gotta go back, and then Andy's there, and then the elevator, and then I think the moment, because the dialogue didn't really bother me. Ian Holmes certainly took me out of the movie. One very small moment that I'm kind of curious to see if they explain is like, why did the xenomorph like save her when she was falling?
I think it's because the xenomorph wants to kill you. I think is the thing.
Oh sure,
like,
it doesn't want her to. Okay,
yeah.
I guess so.
I think that's the main thing, is that it catches her, so it's like, now I can kill you.
Fair enough.
Xenomorph is not interested in seeing you die without its control.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So.
Okay, but I mean, wow. I was flabbergasted by how good Alien Romulus was. The visual design, the practical effects, the special effects, the recontextualization of a younger cast, the fact that this plays into slasher, the fact that it plays back into what made the original Alien so special, but we're so many years removed that it doesn't feel like it's like a cash grab. It's just like, no, this is a really good idea for a sci-fi horror movie. And even if it is kind of in the way that Force Awakens was, just a similar retreading of a similar story tropes, I mean, I think that's a great movie as well. But this movie feels like it stands on its own a lot more. It's like, you don't have to have seen the other Alien movies to go in and just be wowed by amazing practical effects and amazing bits of gore and amazing sequences and like amazing, like the score is just like pounding, like flowing.
But there are things that are drawn attention to in the film that obviously make a lot more sense if you have seen, especially like Prometheus and Covenant, or references that make sense if you have seen Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, even Resurrections to a certain extent. So, I mean, I think it ties the entire franchise together in an interesting way. And at the same time being a sort of homage or, sort of echo of that first film, which obviously Fede Alvarez loves so much. He cited it as one of his Letterboxd 4 faves on the red carpet. So
he should have said that this was one of his 4 faves.
Yeah, like Ridley Scott. He says Alien Romulus. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I like this. I'm gonna go. I think it's very good. I'm gonna go 7.5 out of 10. Just a couple shortcomings that we already went over in my mind.
I agree with those shortcomings in practice, but in execution,
Sure, I get you.
I was so locked in, baby. I was so locked in. I love this movie. I think it's my second or third favorite movie of the year. And I'm gonna go 9.6 out of 10.
Perfect.
Tiny things. Yeah. But maybe on a rewatch that'll even go up. But
negative 0.4 for Ian Holm.
Well, I mean, actually,
yeah.
I mean, that's easily
we agree. We agreed that it's the worst part of the movie. And again,
But thank you very much for listening to this in-depth discussion and dissection. Kind of like a
Alien, like we're doing a thing.
Yeah. Of Alien Romulus. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye. Whoa, you take it easy. Whoa, big guy. Whoa. All right.
Well, that was my workout for the morning.
Oh, I see.
Just flexing your muscles.
Just flexing and really putting a lot of pressure just inside, Yeah.
Because, I mean...
Give yourself a fucking hemorrhoid.
That's what working out is. It's like contracting and uncontracting your muscles. So,
right.
How is this not working out?
I mean...
Think about it.
I guess to a certain... To a certain extent, it is. You're just not going to get very far. But we had a ghost. A ghost. That's perfect right there.
When I get scared, I go.
You lick,
I like
you lick your fingernails instead of biting them.
Instead of like chips of my fingernails flying off, just like little drops of spittle.
Pretty good. It's pretty good.